All right, welcome everyone. We are live and alive. We are just live, aren't we? So excited to have you guys here today, especially because we're going to talk about how you can just get rid of this endless hustle and be able to actually become work optional before you're 55 years old. I don't care if you're, you know, 54. I mean, that might be a little bit more of a challenge depending on your situation. If you're in your 20s or 30s, either way, we're excited to have you. Heck, even if you're in your 60s or 70s, this is still very much applicable to you. So excited to have you on. Hey, as I see there's several of you live right now, go ahead and just post, where you calling from or calling from. I guess you're not calling. Where are you at? Just kind of say hi and just tell us where you're from. Love to be able to see who's actually on live because I do want to make this a little bit more interactive. I do have a lot to teach you today, a lot to give you information wise, but also I want to make sure that there's time for a few questions at least. Uh, Marius from New Hampshire, welcome. Definitely, we don't get a lot from New Hampshire very often. Christopher Waters, good to see you from Nebraska. Always glad to have you on when you come on. Christina from South Carolina, great. Daisy from Florida, good to see you, Daisy. And hopefully everything's good on your end. You didn't. I know with Milton come through, I had to cancel my trip to Orlando. I was actually supposed to be in Orlando today. The whole reason I'm doing this live is because I thought I've got the time. Why not? So Daisy, glad to see that you're actually on, and unlike some of my friends, you actually have power. And obviously, if you're able to be on here live. So thank you so much for being a part of this. All right, so I'm going to get started here. I'm going to get my slides up. Like I said, here's a question I'm going to ask as we get started. I mean, you probably saw this: "Escape the Endless Hustle Before 55" using Max ROI Infinite Banking. The title here. The question I have for you, and I'd love to hear in your comments, is why? Like, why are you here today? Like, what is it for you personally that this is of interest to you? And by the way, even if you're on later, like you're in the future, right? You're in the future here checking this out, even after we've gone live. I love to hear the comments as well as what really motivates you to be here. What do you really want to get out of this today? Because I know I have my intention of what I'm going to give you about showing you how to do it, but I really would love to hear your thoughts. So whether you're on live or you're on in the future watching the recording, go ahead and comment here below. And I'm going to go ahead and add this here. There we go. All right. Daisy, glad to hear that you're all good. I really, really appreciate to hear that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So, like I said, we're going to escape this endless hustle before you're 55 years old. You know, uh, so often we have people talking about it. I actually have two different Dave Ramsey articles. I'll do a different podcast on this one. But one Dave Ramsey article was about, hey, you should delay your retirement into your 70s. And then there was another article. And by the way, there's even money managers been saying this as well. Popular money managers saying, you know what? People should just delay your retirement till you're 70 years old, not 65. The new norm is now 70, not 65. Not the things we were raised up with, was it? And then, of course, we got Dave Ramsey says, hey, you could do it, but it's going to require a lot of discipline. You got to be debt free. You got to stuff that money full in your plan and then live cheap. That's pretty much his answer. If you want to retire before you're 55, be really, really cheap, stuff a lot of money in your retirement plans, and then eventually you might have enough, right? I don't like to live on hope, or as I like to call it, hopium. I don't like to smoke hopium. I don't know if you guys do either, but I like to know that things actually work. And so that's the thing I want to show you. If I can really show you how you could actually retire or become work optional faster, decades faster, without having to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, not having to start a new business, like some people try to pitch you on, or even need a lot of financial training, just like hundreds of my clients and I have already done over the last 14 years, would you want to see how that's done? If the answer is yes, if you want to be able to figure out like, hey, if I can do this decades faster, I'm all in. Well, then keep watching. If not, move on and find something else. Find some funny reel on Facebook to watch or something like that, and just keep going on with your life. But really, that's the thing I really want to show you is kind of what's been that secret sauce. What has really helped our clients do that? Obviously, I've done it myself, but I think even more importantly, it's our clients have done it. So really, I'm going to cover really three main things, although I might give you a few bonuses here. First and foremost, what's the tool that I've used to make money in two places once? We talked about this Max ROI Infinite Banking. What is that? How does it work? I know, Christopher, you just said you want to be an expert in the Max ROI and how you can learn to be more comfortable investing with your whole life policy. Great. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The best investments your financial advisor doesn't want you to know about, right? Believe it or not, financial advisors actually don't give you the best investments. They give you the average investments. They give you the investments that haven't worked for so many people, yet they still keep pitching it because that's how they get paid. I'm going to talk about that. What are those investments you could be doing to actually get there faster? And then, of course, how do you increase your cash flow forever, right? Like, how do you actually get this to keep building what we create an income avalanche from this? Now, just so you know, like we're going to talk about this passive income calculator, especially if you've got at least $150,000, $200,000 that you have to use. I recommend you can go do that, and I'll show you how to do that later on. All right, so I'll show you this kind of picture here. This, if you guys don't know my story, over now it's been almost 23 years. Can you believe it? It's been 22, almost 23 years now that I became a financial advisor. I was the salesman in a suit. The whole reason I became a financial advisor is because I was trying to learn how to start a business. I want to get real life business experience, but I ended up really enjoying it. And especially because the whole thing that really motivated me to become a financial advisor was really because I wanted to one learn about money myself because I wanted to learn how to become financially prosperous, maybe like you do too. And then two, I wanted to help my dad do the same thing. Because understand, guys, like maybe like you, I grew up with phrases like, "Hey, we can't afford this. Hey, we don't have enough money for that." What do you think I am? Made of money? Money doesn't grow on trees, you know. Those kind of phrases. Let me know in the comments if this was you too, if you grew up with these kind of things. Heck, maybe you're even the one that said it to your own kids. I don't know, but those are the kind of phrases I grew up with. But the phrase that really affected me, well, besides when my dad said, "I gave up that Corvette to have kids," that wasn't a great phrase. But the one that did really affect me the most was that my dad would say, he's like, "Chris, I'm going to literally work until I die. Like, I think my job will kill me. The stress from my job will kill me." And so he didn't even think that, I mean, he still planned for retirement, but he was still wondering if he would even make it to retirement because by his 40s and 50s, he already had strokes and heart attacks. And he's kind of like my inspiration for today because, he was the one that worked hard. He taught me good values. You work hard, your word is your bond, everything else. My mom taught me to follow your dreams, your passions, and things like that, which kind of led me to where I am today because of the great values they taught me. However, when it came to money, it was very much a scarce subject. And so I became a financial advisor saying, I don't want to become, in a place where I don't have control of my money, control of my time. I want to have control of my own destiny. And that's why I bought my first starter home that looked like this with a nice little carport. You couldn't even park the car all the way in. It would actually, stick part way out because the stairs were in the way and there was enough room there. As the carport was almost like an afterthought, I think, when it was built. This house, by the way, was built in 1971, had the fuzzy wallpaper, the shag carpet, including the green shag that was so tall, you almost need a lawnmower to vacuum it. It was that bad. That's the house I was living in, giving people financial advice, telling them how they could become financially free. And I'm not saying you have to have this beautiful house, or whatever. Like, I don't care about the ego stuff anymore because, as you'll hear my story, I lost a lot of money and lost a lot of that ego with it. Although I still battle ego every day, but still, like that was a big thing. Like I was a person that was really just living cheap and broke, trying to save up enough to eventually retire, hopefully before I was 55. Ideally, in my 40s is what I was aiming for. And my goal was if I just save up enough, I just keep saving, 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 it's going to work. Right. And so I thought if I could save $2 million, live on 3%, I could live on 60,000 or 5,000 bucks a month. I thought that would be amazing, wouldn't it? Although 5,000 bucks a month doesn't mean much today, it did to me back then because that was a comfortable lifestyle. Well, 4 years after being a financial advisor and telling people how to become financially free, I sat down with my dad. I sat down with him. He actually asked me, he's like, "Chris, when are you going to advise me? I'm 61 years old. I want to retire. I'm done. I want to be out of this." So I sit down with him and I look at his numbers. First time in my life I ever seen all of his finances. He had paid off all of his debt. He was totally 100% debt free, including his mortgage. He had paid it off in 18 years. This guy was on the fast track to being, well, he was already past the fast track of being debt free. He was stuffing money in his 401k, getting the match, doing everything good boys and little girls should be doing, right? And yet, despite all of that, I had to tell him, I said, "Dad, here's the deal. If you want to retire today, especially after you're recovering from Y2K, this is 2005, it's starting to come back up." I said, "Well, just because you're recovering from the market losses, uh, you better hope you die in 5 years because that's when you're going to run out of money." "Okay, Chris, that's not what I wanted to hear from you. I wanted to hear, how do I actually retire?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I mean, you just don't have enough to retire on yet, even though you've done everything right." "Well, what else can I do?" "I don't know. Save more?" I really don't know. I mean, I guess just delay retirement longer." And this bugged me, guys, because I was selling the dream. that as a financial advisor, I'd be able to show you, you could save $100 a month for 40 years, making 12% a year. You'll have $1 million, right? But it wasn't happening. It just wasn't happening at all. And of course, that's when the student's ready to teach your peers. A few weeks later, I reached out to a friend of mine who he said, "Hey, Chris, you know what? My dad and I, we've partnered on some real estate deals. We started doing real estate investing instead of financial advising. And we've actually now got my dad to double his income as a professor at the local university." I said, "Wait a minute, you've only been doing this 4 or 5 months. How can you double his income?" And I was like, he's like, "Well, because real estate's better." I'm like, "No, stocks are better." And I started arguing with him. He's like, "Here's the thing, Chris, how many of your clients are truly financially free where they don't worry about money?" And as I was starting to kind of mentally do an inventory of my clients, even the retired doctors and people like that, I said, "Well, none. They all worry about money." "Okay, Chris. Well, how about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these investments?" And as I really was honest with myself, there's about 100 people in our office. I said, "Probably none." There's your problem. And guys, that's where over like the coming weeks, in months even, I started to learn about this whole other world, right? And I actually got to a place where I became financially free when I was 28 years old, almost 29 years old in 2006. I was able to get to the point I was able to retire because I had enough passive income coming in to pay for my expenses. Just so you know, my expenses were only like 3,500 a month back then. Very easy to do, way easier than this for most people nowadays. But that's not the end of the story, because then in 2007, the markets, what happened? What happened with real estate? Everything started tanking. I got overconfident. I thought, of course, that I would be the guy with the golden touch. I got prideful. I had a lot of ego, lost it all. And it got to this point, okay, I wasn't really living off government cheese, living in a van down by the river like Chris Farley. No, but I was in a place where, I had to downsize drastically. I actually lost that home in 2009, a week before my fourth child was born. So I actually offered to pay him $2,000 just stay in another 2 weeks, just so that I could have the time to find a new place, have a baby. Well, I wasn't having the baby. My wife was. She was doing all the hard work. I was just sitting there watching, I guess, and just trying to make sure that I could have that time to be able to get our family somewhere else settled, while we're dealing with, a new baby and postpartum and everything else, and my wife at that time was bawling her head off as we lost our dream home, but that's the great thing is I want to teach you guys that I was able to do it a second time. I was able to dig out of this rat race again without filing for bankruptcy that time. Even though I was over $1 million in debt, I was able to dig out of that hole and pay off a lot of it, in just 3 years. And even over the ensuing years, by the end of 2016, I was able to become financially independent the second time, making a lot more than 3,500 a month this time around. And so I had to do it myself. But more importantly, guys, more than just me doing it twice, which, I know it's a decent feat. More importantly, we've had lots of our clients do the same thing. And usually our typical client finds at least $20,000 or more in the first year alone. And I try to make that number lower just to not overpromise anything. And so this is not just something that worked for me, although that would be great, not just worked for me twice, but again, it's worked for many other people. And I think that's the most important thing for you is that it can't just be like a flash in the pan or something that I just got lucky doing. Even if lightning struck twice in my life, the more important thing is, can we replicate it over and over to where it's a proven system? And that's where I really believe and know for a fact that it's not about how much money you accumulate. It's the cash flow, the passive income you get from those investments. That's what creates true freedom. When you have that money coming in each and every month, that's when you have options, isn't it? Think about it. If you had enough money, say you had another 10,000 a month coming in right now, would that change the way you deal with your life? In fact, even if it was $5,000 a month, come on. $3,000, $2,000 a month. Heck, you might even take an extra $1,000 a month, I'm sure. Would that make a difference in your life right now to have that money coming in each and every month? I would think that for a lot of you, it probably would be, right? For you, those you live, feel free to chime in and comment anytime. Throw in an amen or just a Y for yes or an N for no. If you're like, man, screw it, whatever. Feel free to always chime in because I'm watching. By the way, Michelle from Colorado, welcome. So here's the problem, guys, is that you have been taught the same thing forever. You've been taught the same education, yet you're battling interest rates going crazy. You have inflation had been going crazy as well. And of course, your raises and lifestyle work, no matter what they say inflation is, that inflation is much more than what the government's trying to tell you it is, isn't it? Plus, you got people out there telling you just live on rice and beans, just live cheaper and live that life. You got guys like this, he's telling you save $100 a month for 40 years, right? Like I mentioned before, you'll have 1.176 million. You do not need to retire broke. Here's the problem, Dave. Good old Davey boy. Here's the problem is that one, he did the math wrong. If you save $100 a month for 40 years at 12% interest rate, which by the way, does the market ever really truly give 12% long term? Short term, it has, yes. Long term, no, it has not. Yet he touts it like it is truth, like I used to as a financial advisor, doing the same thing. And you only have $1 million, you have 979,000. So even then, you're not a millionaire. And of course, in 40 years, what's $1 million going to be worth, anyways? Is it going to be worth really that much? No. So I remember 40 years ago, a million seemed a heck of a lot more impactful. You would have butlers, maids, everything else if you were a millionaire. Now you're just upper middle class if you're a millionaire, right? Sometimes middle class as a millionaire, depending on where you live. It's just not as much anymore. By the way, here's a real return on the stock market. It's close to about 8.4% as of even just recently. So 8.4% long term in the last 30 years is the true average of the S&P 500, not 12%. So you start throwing in those numbers, it just doesn't even get close. So you're not no longer a millionaire. That same $100 a month now ends up being like $300,000 instead of a million or 1.2 almost, as he falsely claimed. And here's what's even more hurtful for me, guys, is that you see this comment. If you can read it here, you see that top comment. It's like, I followed your advice since I was 18. I'm now 50 and it hasn't worked, right? What else do you recommend? She followed advice for supposedly 30 years of Dave Ramsey's advice and still asks for more advice from him? Why? This is the kind of like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Or if you quote the great philosopher Jerry Seinfeld, he says in the episode Opposite George, he says, if every instinct you have is wrong, well, then the opposite would have to be right, right? What if we were to do the opposite? What if we were to do something different? Because the majority of Americans aren't retiring financially free. Just so you know, the average 65-year-old only has about $300,000 or so in their 401ks and IRAs. Even better yet, or worse yet, depending on how you look at it, Fidelity has 45 million accounts. And of those 45 million, only 810,000 have over $1 million. That means 1.8% of people finally hit that millionaire status. Yet Transamerica did a study and said of those same people, they wanted to get their confidence level for retirement. And guess what? 35% of those people that had over $1 million said they would take, quote unquote, a miracle to be able to retire. This means only about 1% of people even feel comfortable with their retirement having at least $1 million. You see a problem here, guys? If 99% is wrong, why would we go for hoping that we're the 1%? And even worse, guys, along the way, doing these kind of plans, these savings plans you've been doing, how much cash flow are you making more per month using these saving plans? How much is it benefiting your family? What is it doing to them? What are they hearing? What are the stories they hear? What are the terms they hear, just like I heard growing up and maybe you heard growing up? How is that affecting you and affecting everybody else, right? This is why cash flow is what creates freedom. It doesn't matter what you might be promised in the future. That's like what all people do, right? Like, hey, someday you'll have this. You don't know if you'll have someday. Look at the sign behind me. Live your life now, not tomorrow. Heck, my shirt, even I wore the shirt, live your life now, just for this topic, because you don't know if you will even make it to age 65 or 70. Heck, we don't know if we'll make it to 55. I don't even know if I'll make it to tomorrow. I hope I will. I'm making sure my health wise, I'm trying to do what I can, but we have no guarantees, do we? Why we pretend like it is? So here's the proven process and system. I call it the wealth wheel, right? That works. One, you got to have the right education and principles, understanding of really flipping this upside down. In fact, I'll tell you, the less education you have financially, the better you'll get this. The more common sense you have, the easier it is. So the good news is, even if you say, I'm not a financial genius, don't worry. In fact, the people that have the most financial training have the hardest time flipping it to the way that works, because they've been indoctrinated. And it's not your fault either. You've been indoctrinated for years and years by financial advisors and financial experts who work for all the same big financial companies that make money off of you putting money with them. They'll tell you to set it and forget it. Why? Because they're going to charge their guaranteed fees from you day after day, year after year. They always get paid, yet you don't get paid during that period of time. You ever notice that's a challenge, a problem? Is that even, you don't even wonder if that's even ethical. Even if it's legal, is it ethical that they're saying, hey, just put your money with us, save it, keep compounding that interest forever because it compounds our income forever. They get paid every year. What about you? You don't. You just save it and hope you accumulate it long enough to have something in there. So you got to have this education to be able to know what actually has been proven to work, which I'm going to talk about today. I'm also going to talk about this Max ROI Infinite Banking. How can you get that money now to pay you twice using passive income investments in coordination with it? These two work together. I will tell you this flat out. When we're talking about Max ROI Infinite Banking, that by itself will not make you financially free. It won't do it. Passive income investments will make you financially free, and you can do just passive income investments. But if you want to be able to get there a little bit faster, especially in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you want to get there faster than waiting 40 years to find out it doesn't work, then using these two in coordination with each other actually throws more gas, more fuel in the fire, so to speak, right? So when you use all this stuff together, you can get there faster. Some of our clients have done it in less than a year. Others might take 10, 15, 20 years to do it. But you can get there faster if you're doing it within this right order. So let's talk about this first, the education principles. That perspective determines action. How you see the world determines how you're going to act. If you see everything like a financial advisor, you're going to do everything like a financial advisor, which is pay off debt, put money in mutual funds, which I already said has been proven not to work. Now, this picture I use for a few different reasons. One, it's kind of funny, not really flattering, depending on your perspective. You might see the perspective of this unflattering photo of me and say, put a shirt on. Others might see this and say, why are you chasing that poor little girl? And then others of you say, why are you getting beat by that little girl? Right? We all have different perspectives and how we respond to this. Even emotionally, we respond differently based on the perspective. I'll give you the true perspective. Well, okay, it's the one that I have, but it's the truth in this sense. We're running two different races. She's running a 5K, and this is at the finish line. I'm finishing my 10K. So technically, I'm running twice as fast, but it doesn't look like it. It just looks like I'm some creepy guy chasing her, or some guy getting my butt kicked by this little girl, doesn't it? And and that's the thing. Perspective determines action. How we see the world, how we see our money, is what determines the actions we take with it, which will either get us to freedom or get us to constantly working forever, right? And the thing is, you can either take the red pill, and wake up, or you take the blue pill and go back to sleep here. I talk about there's different types of mentalities here. I'm not going to put a lot of attention onto this, but you do need to understand this basic thing. There's really three mindsets when it comes to money, three perspectives. There's the spender. For spenders, you're always focusing on income. You always want to produce more income so you can spend it. But it's easy come, easy go. You never find freedom. You're always in scarcity. And spenders, by the way, get the bad rap. The truth is, a lot of business owners are spenders. That's why they become business owners, because they have more control of their money. They can make more and therefore spend more. Here's the problem. They're in scarcity. They don't have any hope of freedom, but neither do savers. On the other extreme, savers also don't have hope of freedom. The reason I have this as like this bell curve is because all the wealth is in the middle with the stewards. Less wealth is with the spenders and the savers. Savers also can never save enough. They can never pay off debt fast enough. They always feel like they're in bondage, because as long as they have to pay a bill, they have to pay for utilities, they have to pay for taxes, they have to pay for insurances. They always feel like they're in bondage. They never feel free. They're also the people that are taught to accumulate money. They are the best, most obedient people to financial advisors, right? They're the ones that will store up money, hoard it like little squirrels, and then hopefully they'll have something someday to live on those little bit of nuts, coming out in the wintertime, the winter of their retirement. The problem is this, is that I was this person. I was the person teaching this philosophy as a financial advisor. It doesn't work. The only way to have abundance and have true wealth is to be a steward. Steward takes the best of the spender and the saver puts it into one person. Because to see the spenders, at least they're willing to use money. They just use the money in a way that's unwise, and it doesn't come back to them. But savers, at least they're willing to be wise with it, but they don't do anything with the money. They just let it sit and park it in some place, hoping it's going to be there for them someday, like my dad did, only to find out it's just not enough, as they say, right? That's not cool with me. A steward says, how can I take this money and use it in a way that multiplies, it grows, it does more for me. It works harder for me, so I don't have to work so hard for it. That's what a steward does. And unfortunately, very few percent of people ever have this stewardship mentality of saying, what's the highest and best use of my money, my time, all the resources that I have, not just money, even my talents and energy and everything I put out into the world. What's the best and highest use of this to be able to create value for people, and also to get it to expand and grow, to increase my stewardship? That's what it's all about. That's the key. You look in the Bible, they talk about the parable of the talents. That's a great example of stewardship. Notice that the saver was the one that buried the talent, buried the money, dug it up, and paid it back to his master. He was debt free. Yet the master says, get out of here. I gave you a charge to make more with this. You didn't do it. I'm going to give it to the guy that had five that made 10. I'm going to give it to him because I know he's going to do something with it. Or in other words, it could be the woman that does something with it too, right? That's what a steward does. They're focused on acceleration of money, not the accumulation of money. They don't worry about compounding interest, right? Compounding interest is cool to some level, but they give it way more credit than it needs due. What about today? How can I create acceleration of my money now? How can I get my money to pay me now? Not later, not down the road when I'm 70 years old, but what about today? That's the focus you need to have if you want to be able to retire before you're 55. And here's the three things I give you as advice is get lean, get liquid, and get out. Get lean means be a wise steward of your money. Doesn't mean live cheap and live on rice and beans, but means be a wise steward. Get liquid means you need to get your money out of prison. Stop locking your money away into places where other banks and advisors have control of it and get it in your control. And then when you have it in your control, you can then get it out to make passive income. That's the three steps to making this work. So here's one thing you do. If you want to obviously be a wiser steward of your money, track your money. Use Monarch Money or Rocket Money. Start tracking your money each and every month. I've had clients do this. Seriously, I had somebody who was a business owner. She's like, I'm too busy to do that. And then when I finally got her to do it, we found 1,800 bucks a month. That's over 20 grand a year back in her life without having to restrict her, having to make her be cheap, right? Without having to make her sacrifice her life. We literally just found money leaking in places that didn't need to be, like subscriptions and services, things that they weren't even using anyways. It's like, get rid of this stuff. You're not even using it. Do you even know you're spending for it? Well, yeah, I knew about it. I just didn't know how much. Well, now you know. Do you want it or not? No, not really. Get rid of it. Pay for things you do want that bring value to your life. Get rid of things that don't, right? Selling assets, sell off your stuff. This was my dad's basement. He loved the crane machine, right? He would get the stuffed animals out. He was good at it, but he would just accumulate the stuff. Occasionally he would sell it. Like you see on this far right, you see this Harley Davidson pigs. His neighbor put up a yard sale and he's like, oh, okay, I'll put out some of those Harley Davidson pigs. Sold them for 20 bucks each. And we told him, like, Dad, listen, what if you were to buy your own crane machine, fill the crane machine full of these toys? You probably would make way more money. You'd probably have your retirement. He's like, no, I can't do that. No, I can't. You know what happened? This is what happens whenever you don't use assets. If you're not going to use it, see, my mantra is if you're not going to use it, lose it. Like get rid of it, donate it, get the tax write-off, right? Whatever you got to do. But in his case, because he didn't use them, eventually there was floods that happened in his basement, wiped out a bunch of it. It was just wasted stuff. It just eventually deteriorated. It got to the point where you couldn't even give it away. You couldn't even donate it because it wasn't healthy to donate it to a fire department or anything else. And he did donate lots, but he just had all this collection. What's the use of trying to have all this stuff if it doesn't do anything for you? Give you an example. I told one client, I said, listen, you've got this condo. Now I love real estate, but I said, this condo doesn't cash flow very much, 100 bucks a month, but you got a lot of equity in here. You can actually use this equity for one, you could pay off these credit cards, freeing up 1,100 a month, which means you net 1,000 a month and you still have 40 grand left over to do something else with. You could actually get a rental that would pay him more money. And he's like, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. Like that's for my son in 6 or 7 years. I'm like, that's fine. But you could be creating more freedom now to have more than enough money to then take care of your son's education and give him a place to live and everything else. And he was just so short-sighted, or not even short-sighted. He was so delusional about what was going on. He's like, I just can't do it. By the way, this is the same guy that also had hired so many people in his company that he and his wife had to work 80 hours a week to keep it afloat. And they were just barely making a decent middle-class income, working 80 hours a week each. Because again, he was so addicted to what I called staff and stuff, right? He wanted those things because it gave him ego, but it didn't give him money back in his pocket. Forgo the ego, forget the ego. I've had people also have like gold, silver, Bitcoin just sitting around doing nothing. And I'm like, what is it paying you in cash flow? Nothing. Well, what if you use that money to go and invest and do this? Now you have a cash flowing asset, a real asset that's still cash flowing. You don't even have to sell it all off, sell some of it and then use that money to do that. Nah, I can't do it. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Now, I had other people that said they did it, and then all of a sudden now they had cash flow coming in, especially before crypto tanked. Some people like cashed it out and they got a real asset with it that actually pays them real cash flow. They're grateful because until you sell those things, you never made any money. It doesn't mean anything on paper until you sell it. It's just an arbitrary number. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything for you day to day. It's all about the income. Are you getting the theme here? It's the income, right? Insurances. We actually had a client recently. out in California that we're able to save them 1,100 a month on their health insurance premiums by using one of our guys in our team. One of our health insurance specialists that we can refer out to. I've had other people like on the life insurance side. We've had some people save literally thousands of dollars a year in extra costs that they were paying on their life insurance they didn't need to pay. Sometimes auto and health homeowners insurance. There's so many ways that sometimes you can reduce fees just by doing it better, right? It doesn't mean you have to be uninsured. It just means how can we use insurance to be able to pull some levers to free up more cash flow, and then that money also helps improve your life. Heck, you have more savings, you can actually have a bigger deductible, which also saves you on premiums, right? So how do we make sure you have a good emergency fund so you can increase your deductibles and therefore free up money on your insurance premiums? By the way, that's the secret for almost any insurance is how do you increase those deductibles, but make sure you have enough in savings to cover those deductibles. Taxes. I forgot to change the picture on that. So I guess you get the insurance for it too. For taxes, right? Tax is a big one, especially for business owners. I mean, there's so many ways. We find when we refer them to our accountants, usually at least 5 to 10,000 a year they're overpaying. I had one client that just recently, we referred them over and they were finding over $30,000 a year. I had another client, he was a chiropractic coach and found out he was overpaying $50,000 a year in taxes. Guys, he literally cried on our call. Cried. I'm not sure if he was crying because of gratitude or he's crying because he had overpaid for so long and he realized how much money he lost. I don't know which way it was. I just know he was definitely grateful on the other side of it. Maybe not so much in that moment when he found out. But that was a huge thing for him. I even ran into somebody recently that their dad was a dentist. And they said, yeah, well, my dad's accountant says that he shouldn't ever claim, he really shouldn't have a corporation in place until he's making at least $1 million a year. Now, this dentist was still bringing home about 300,000 a year. I said, do you realize just by him having a corporation, just because how he can pay himself, and free up some costs, he can actually save himself 30,000 a year in just Social Security tax alone, let alone income taxes. We're like, oh, why isn't he doing it? I don't know. Like, why don't we find out? Well, my accountant's conservative. No, he's not. He's just doesn't know the rules and therefore stays so far back from the line of the rules. They'll say they're conservative, but really they're saying they're ignorant is what's happening. So, man, having the right accountant is huge. We even have discussion boards in our own clients saying, hey, who are you using for this accountant? What are you guys using? I mean, that comes up all the time. Debt's another way to free up money, right? I'm not going to go into a lot about this, but here's the steward way to look at debt. Don't fear debt. Don't fear it. You can respect it, know that it can hurt you, but it can also be something to help you too. And when I'm talking about debt, I don't mean like negative equity, like going in the hole. I mean, you have loans like on a mortgage. Don't fear having a mortgage. Even if you have student loans, it doesn't mean to have fear about those student loans. Now, if you have excessive credit cards, you should be concerned. You need to respect that, right? But don't fear it. Fear only brings scarcity in, and usually you make the worst decisions when in fear. Just like people make the worst decisions when in the opposite of fear, which is like greed or overconfidence and pride, that also makes bad decisions. Don't be in fear, but do respect it. Now I have a tool that I use called the cashflow index that I created back in 2008. This is what helped bail me out of a lot of that 900,000 in debt. One, I sold off a lot of stuff. I started tracking my money. All the things I've taught you helped me get out of this debt hole. But then figuring out which debt to pay off first, I use this cash flow index. I'm not going to go into huge details about the cash flow index in this one. I've done other master classes that if you're on our YouTube channel, the Money Ripples podcast channel, if you go into the live section, we have other ones we talk about like, cash flow and debt and things like that. But I'll tell you, like when I created that cash flow index, that helped me pay off debt so much faster and in a safer way than even the income, the debt avalanche, the debt snowball methods that you hear about with the pay off the lowest balance, the highest interest rates. Those are okay. But this is better. In fact, just this last week, had a client come in. Now, this client, we have to kind of go in phases. She's got the potential to make a lot of money too. She's got this equity in her home. But the problem is that she's also got a lot of debt that had racked up from like expensive attorney fees, divorce costs, things like that. So she's kind of coming back on the other side of it. And so we're going in phases. So the first phase was, hey, she's like, I'm getting a $6,000 bonus at work. I said, cool. Okay, well, that's great. She's like, I'm thinking about paying off these credit cards. I'm like, well, those could be good, but let's based on this cash flow index. I said, let's pay off this one, and then part of this one. And let's also stop your contributions to your 401k. Because why would you be in a, and she was in a negative cash flow situation. This is why. Why would you, if you're in a negative cash flow situation, where do you go if you don't have savings anymore? Ching, the credit card, right? Why we charge up a high interest credit card? Because you're trying to put money in a 401k. Well, I get the match. Yeah, but understand that that's not a 100% match. It's only 100% at that moment, but it's not a 100% rate of return. Trust me, guys, if you ever put your 401k in a calculator, try putting in saving 20,000 a year in a calculator, earning 108% return, because you get the double match plus 8% market returns. Do that for 20 years and you'll find out you're a quadrillionaire. I can promise you will not be richer than Bezos or Buffett putting money, 20,000 a year in your 401k, earning 100% return. It's not double. It doubles the money you have going in, but it only doubles long term. It usually only adds like 2 or 3% a year. So usually you might only end up with an 8 or 9% total average from a 401k because their funds usually suck. So I told her, like, why would you do that when we could pay off these high interest credit cards? So stop contributing your 401k, and instead, that's $100 a month. Now that's not going to do anything immediate, but that's going to give you a little bit more money in your pocket to help get rid of this hole you're in. And we're also, because you do have a 401k, let's get a 401k loan. We can get maybe another 3,000 out of it. Use that to pay off some of these cards, especially based on these indexes. Some of them we wouldn't pay using the 401k because it does have a higher kind of a payment, kind of aggressive payback, over 5 years. I'm like, but if we pay off these ones, this will free up this much. I was like, look, just with $6,000 and then using this 401k loan, that's no money out of your pocket, really, we can actually free up $600 a month. And then what do we do that 600 a month? Then we can roll it to that next debt. And then we can start aggressively paying some of those down. And the cool thing is we're also building her credit score at the same time. So then we can, once we get her credit score high enough, go and do a cash out refinance to pay off the rest of those loans, freeing up about $2,000 a month total. And she might even have some money to invest as well to be able to offset the interest that she's paying on that mortgage and make more money with, again, no money out of pocket. That's kind of the cool thing. By the way, if you guys think that's cool, put in a Y. If they thought that was kind of a cool strategy, you think, put in a question mark, so go ahead and do that right now. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's why Albert Einstein says creativity is intelligence, having fun. I learned this because I was in the hole myself and I had to get creative and resourceful with my money. Doing that for her was awesome. Now, she's not the typical client we have. She's somebody that I've actually known for 10 years that I've worked with. And so, because we could see that she could eventually have that potential, that phase 2 of getting to that cash out refinance to then generate more passive income. For her, we could literally get her, she's actually right now 55. We could probably get her financially free before she's 60, even though we just started now. So awesome. So exciting. As I mentioned, stop 401k contributions. This is not a bad thing as long as you don't blow the money. Okay. I'm not saying blow the money, but that 401k, what if we put that money elsewhere? Because, and I'll get to this in a second, guys, is the 401k the right vehicle if you want to retire at 55? Well, guess what? There's the rule of 55. You have to kind of play and dance around and do some, jump through some hoops to do. But for the most part, guess what the rule is for 401ks? It's 59 and a half, right? And by the way, what income do you get in the meantime with a 401k? How much cash flow does the 401k pay you when you're 30 years old? Zero. In fact, you're only paying for it. How much cash flow does it pay you when you're 40 years old? Zero. How much cash flow does your 401k pay you when you're 50? Zero. How much does it pay you when you're 55? Zero. How much can it pay you when you're 60? You can finally take money out. And guess what? You don't even have tax advantages because you're going to have to still pay taxes on that 401k money later. That means you're gambling that the government's going to keep taxes the same or lower your taxes in the future. Or are you gambling thinking, well, maybe they'll raise their tax in the future. Oh, wait. If they're going to raise their tax in the future, does that mean that my 401k is a good thing to get a tax write-off now? Or maybe would a Roth IRA be better? But by the way, does Roth IRA have rules? Yes. Do you have to wait till you're 59 and a half where you have penalties? Yes. Can you still access a little bit of it? Yes, better. It's better, but it's not quite the same thing. And that's where we come to income, right? How do we create this income, which is what's going to get you to retirement before 55? Now, there's all kinds of ways you can do active income. And I definitely recommend if there's ways to create more income right now, do it. Do it. Anything that can help you build and grow your cash faster, do it. Just don't do it at the sacrifice of your sanity, your family, your health. Don't go overboard, right? Like there's still got to be that moderation, but you could definitely do all kinds of things to create more active income. But what about passive income? Because if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you're going to work until you die, as Warren Buffett says, right? So coming back to this big picture, I want to come back to that passive income in a second because I got to talk about this Max ROI Infinite Banking because this will actually allow you to build it faster. And for some of you, you may not have a lot of cash available right now to invest. This might be one of your best steps. And even if you do have a lot of cash available, this could still be a great step because this allows you to actually build your cash faster and safer than even keeping it in the bank. Because here's the deal. I mean, how many of you guys would love to have a savings account that is not just tax free, which we don't get with savings accounts in the United States? We don't have tax free savings accounts, but you have a tax free savings account that pays you more than point nothing percent, but it's also protected from lawsuits and creditors too. Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, that's kind of what we're talking about here. If you design it the right way. Now, we call this, we actually have our own trademark thing called Max ROI Infinite Banking. The reason we call it that is because I realized firsthand that just throwing your money in the market doesn't always work. Okay. Even just throwing your money inside life insurance doesn't always work either. I've learned this over the years that throw your money into certain things may not be done the best way. The first policy I bought was like a traditional whole life policy. I read the book by Nelson Nash, Become Your Own Banker. Great institute, great people. It woke me up to what's possible using this whole life insurance policy. However, I bought mine in 2006. 2008, I was negative cash flow, as you guys well know. I was hurting even 2007 going to 2008 and 9. I couldn't afford to keep paying those premiums, but there was no cash in it. If you don't understand what whole life insurance is, there's term life insurance, which is just death insurance. If you die, you croak, you get paid. Your family gets paid. You don't get anything. You just get a box. Your family gets paid, right? But if you do whole life, yes, it has that death benefit, but it also has this tax-free savings account inside of it. It's not an investment. I actually just did record a podcast about how it's not an investment like somebody claimed on social media, but it is a savings account, right? A tax-free savings account that builds and grows. Now, that savings account for mine had nothing in it because it was all paying for the insurance costs. What rocked my world is I realized I could actually manipulate the numbers because understand, even when I bought it from that so-called expert, and sadly, I worked with a company where that guy, everybody revered as the expert, found out that he was really just overcharging everyone. Took me 2 years, by the way, to convince that. Yes, Daisy, you know who I'm talking about, don't you? So, it took me 2 years to finally convince him to change this method a little bit. And even then, it wasn't the full way that I wanted it changed. This is why eventually, even in my own company, Money Ripples, we brought it in-house back in 2017 because I couldn't find any insurance agent that was consistently willing to, one, think like an investor, and then two, minimize their commissions and the insurance costs as low as it could possibly go while keeping it tax-free. That's what we did differently. And understand this tax-free savings account, this money can be used to invest. See, what most people don't realize, they keep thinking it's like supplemental retirement, putting their money in this life insurance policy. No, I mean, yes, that's true. You could. But again, if you want to do it before you're 55, I could throw my money into 401k, but I have all these 59 and a half and all these rules, right? But here I can put my money in. I can actually get my money out in the first year because almost all the money I'm putting in goes right into cash. And by the third or fourth year, it's already paying for itself. So it's almost like free insurance at this point to where it's growing by more than what I'm contributing, which makes it like this tax-free supercharged savings account. And even better than that, the great thing is that I can also leverage this money to go do investments. Let me explain what I mean. Now, first, here's how I fund these policies. This is another thing I do differently. For those first 2 or 3 years, I'm just having people use their emergency fund. Why? Because if they have money to invest, I want them to invest it for passive income. Thing I'm going to talk about here. But two, the other reason is because those net costs come out in this first 2 years. It's not a ton, but there's still costs coming out. If we use your emergency fund to diversify, and it's almost like moving your money from a crappy bank account to a high yield savings account, but now it's tax-free and protected from lawsuits and creditors in most states. So if I can do that, I can literally store millions of dollars in here and not lose it because it's guaranteed to always grow and it's guaranteed from lawsuits, creditors, and taxes. I'm going to put my money there, right? Keep it safe and let it grow better than the bank does anyways. But then years 4 and beyond, because it's already now growing by more than I put in. So if you're putting in, say, $20,000 a year, but it's going to grow by $22,000 that year. Well, now I have no problem putting in that $20,000 because I can just pull that money right back out and invest it. Does that make sense? So I still get the insurance, I still get the benefit, but now I'm able to use that money to invest in other places wherever I want. There's no restriction. Not like, most 401ks and IRAs you can self-direct and do a lot of things with, but sometimes there's additional taxes you got to worry about. Like if you try to invest your 401k into an investment property and while getting a mortgage, and even in some cases, even doing apartment syndications and things like that, guess what? You'll actually get taxed before you're supposed to get taxed. You'll get taxed on the growth and then you get taxed when you pull the money out too. Possible double taxation. It's not the right thing. But here, I can invest it wherever I want and keep all the tax benefits from real estate. So let's talk about how I use this. I use this to replace my savings account when I invest. Now, I will tell you this, I still have a savings account. If I have cash building up in cash, I'll use that money first just to get out and invest because I know I'm making nothing in the bank. If I'm going to store my money anywhere, I'll store it in this thing. But if I've now have opportunities coming up, I'm saying, oh, I need to dip into more cash beyond my emergency fund because I'll keep most of my emergency fund in this. Because if I have $300,000 in this, making at least 5% or more a year, it's now going to be paying 6% next year. But I'm making 5% tax free. That 300,000 makes me 15,000 a year instead of the 0.1% with my credit union, where I make a whopping 300 bucks a year. Right? I'd much rather have the 15,000 than 300 bucks, and it's tax free. So what I do here is that, yes, I have that money storing up for cash, and then I can also use it to invest. So you see kind of how the arrows work. You have the money going to your policy. Now the money then you borrow from the insurance company. You can withdraw the money, but just so you know, when you withdraw the money, you stop the ability to earn compounding interest on that money, right? Just like if you liquidate a savings account, you're no longer earning interest. But if I borrow from the insurance company, yes, I do pay them interest, but I put in that investment and then I take the cash flow from that investment to pay back that line of credit. Now what happens is I pay them, the insurance company or the bank, less interest than they're paying me on the tax-free returns of that money. So let me explain that again. If I borrow the money from the insurance company, my money's still in there. Say I have $100,000, I borrow $50,000, all 100,000 is still earning compounding tax-free interest. But then, yeah, I'm paying them interest. I might be paying them 6% interest, but because I take that money, their cash flow, say I'm making, 5,000 a year from that investment or 10%, I take that 5,000 a year, pay down that line of credit. Now the interest that I'm paying on that goes down, 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 just like it does on a car loan. So more and more goes the principal, less the interest. That's because you're paying the balance down, not because the interest rate drops, because you're paying the balance down. Less and less gets charged interest. So what happens is I end up making more money over here than what they charge me over here. So I make a spread. I make more money there. I make money there, and I'm still making cash flow on the investment that I was going to be using to replenish into my savings account, to then build up that cash flow, to then reinvest again. I can just do it faster because I'm getting paid a higher interest with the life insurance company. And there is the real secret. So let me show you an example. Say you have an apartment you want to buy. It has a $1 million apartment. You have to put 25% down or 250,000, and say that your net profit is 2,500 a month. Now, if you liquidated your savings account and then took the 2,500 a month to build it up, and you're earning 0.2%, guess what that's going to be worth after 9 years? 1,200 bucks after you pay taxes. So after all that, you paid in $270,000 of payments going back over those 9 years. You only make 1,200 bucks after you pay taxes. That's nothing. Using that same strategy, even though there's insurance costs that are coming out, even despite that, and even though there's interest being charged by the insurance company, even when I net all those out, what's my net profit or gain on my life insurance over that same 9-year period? About 100 times more. By the way, I use my own policy. I'm in my mid 40s. If you're in your 30s, it could be better. If you're in your 50s, it could be a little worse. Either way, you can already see it's significantly better than trying to use a savings account. What could you do with an extra $100,000 more? Could that be another investment that generates maybe another $10,000 a year? Yes, right? That would be huge. This is how you can get to your goals faster, right? I love, if you got a fever, the only prescription is more arbitrage, right? Making more money off other people's money. That's how you do it. And I even show comparisons here, the yellow versus the green. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but sometimes people say, what if I just use my savings account? I don't even buy term invest the difference. What if I just invest? Well, even this example, using one of my clients, this 10-year plan, they're trying to get to 10,000 a month. At year 10, they're almost there. They're about a little over 9,000 a month at year 10. But on the green side, using the infinite banking, even though it was behind in the beginning because of those costs coming out, it caught up by year 10 to where it had 121,000. So it actually shaved off an entire year towards their goal of hitting 10,000 a month. That's the difference. That's what I say. Like, this is like throwing extra fuel on the fire. You don't need this to become financially free. Even if you're on the yellow side, even if you're just investing, you'll still get there. But if it can shave off an extra year, 2, maybe 3 years off of your goals to get you where you want to go, that gives you an extra, and it's not just a year, 2 or 3, That's a year, 2 or 3 of your life back that you will never have back again if you don't do this, right? Wouldn't that be worth it? If you're still with me, type Y. If you're not with me, type N. I just want to make sure you guys are still awake because I'm about to move into the question and answer period after I talk about some of these passive investments. But this is pretty cool, or what? I mean, you starting to see this? You starting to see how this works together as the bigger plan? It's not about just using the strategy. That's the problem with all these insurance agents out there. They're always saying, buy the insurance and that will help you become financially free. No, it won't. I mean, yes, it does help you, but it won't by itself. You need the passive investments to go with it. And that's where we go into this next part of passive investments, right? I have this, Facebook post that I did a few years back saying, check it out. Like I actually this person that 19,000 a month of passive income by 2022. Granted, they had over $1 million to invest. I will say this, okay? But great. I'm glad to see you guys are all with me still. But yeah, the funny thing is there's a real estate investor that said, show me how to do it. He actually now is doing it. A few years later, he actually started to do the same thing, saved his bacon when the real estate market got affected 2 years ago. It actually was the one thing that helped him out because he had passive income coming in. Now, I'm not talking about passive income where you make money while you sleep, literally by having people, disturb you with loud noises and then you get paid for it. No, you don't have to lose sleep over this at all. In fact, you can actually really sleep. Now, get liquid. I talk about get lean, get liquid, get out, right? Lots of places you can get this money. This is why I say you got to have your money liquid to be able to do this before 55. Bank savings is a great place. Life insurance cash value. Christopher, that's for you, right? Life insurance cash value, using that money to invest, as we just explained. Mutual funds is another place. Old 401ks and IRAs. Not the current 401ks you have at work because they lock that money up in prison until you either quit or get fired or something happens. You change jobs. And I don't recommend those strategies as trying to ways to access your 401k money. So I do recommend that, we're talking about money like this, liquid, old 401ks and IRAs, things like that, Roth IRAs could also be used. Rental properties. I'll talk about an example of this in a second, right? Rental properties is another one where you might have extra equity in those properties that maybe if you sold them could make more elsewhere. How about home equity? We talked about that with one of my clients already. I already talked about gold, silver, crypto, like things where it's just money sitting there, but not generating more income. And here's the thing, guys, if you want to do it before you're 55, you've got to have the right vehicle. The 401ks, the Roth IRAs, the IRAs are all vehicles that try to slap your hand for touching your own money if you're not 59 and a half years old. So if you want to do it before then, don't keep funding those things. Don't fund a 401k. Once this became clear to me in my late 20s, I cashed out my 401k. I took actually the penalty, the hit, the tax hit. It wasn't huge, but I took it because I realized, I said, wait a minute, if I want financial freedom sooner than age 60, I can't keep throwing money into that 401k plan I had with my employer. So I stopped it. I started getting money in my own control instead. This is why so many of our clients actually stop funding 401ks. Now, some might still, they might minimum fund a little bit. Heck, I love the 401k plans that they throw money in there, even when you don't. Best 401ks ever. I love it. If you're over the age of 60, by the way, I might still recommend doing a 401k if you have what's called in-service distributions allowed, which means you can put the money in, get the match, and then pull the money right back out, and then you invest it. That generally only works if you're in your 60s or older, and if the company, the plan actually allows it. So you have to check your plan if you're in your 60s right now. Listen to this. So you got to have the right vehicle. If you want to try to get to Paris, France from New York, you're not going to take a car. It's the wrong vehicle, right? You're just going to sink. You're going to lose. The best thing is at least take a boat. Better yet, take a plane, take a jet plane, right? Take Delta One. I don't care. Like take whatever it takes for you to get there faster. You got to have the right vehicles. Like I mentioned, those rules, 59 and a half years old, you get a 10% penalty. You're also capped on how much you contribute. It's $23,000 a year that you're capped. Now with contributions from employers, you can get in there up to $69,000 a year, but that's it. And that's still pretty significant. That is definitely significant. But if you're a business owner paying your own match, when you already have all these write-offs and everything in your business and you're trying to retire with this thing, when you're probably going to have a higher tax bracket later on, why would you do that? I think as a business owner, the worst thing I would do is actually fund my own 401k in hopes that I get a tax break, but really I'm just delaying my taxes to a future date. I don't get tax breaks. I'm just delaying my income to another date, hoping and praying the government will have mercy on me and lower taxes when we're already in one of the lowest tax brackets in the last 110-year history of the federal income tax brackets. Not as likely, right? And then, of course, by the way, I don't know if you knew this, but after age 72, you're required to pull out certain amount each and every year. Even if you don't need it, if you don't pull out that amount of money, they will penalize you 50% of the money you were supposed to pull out. So they'll give you a penalty on that money too. So they make sure they always get their money back. This is some of the rules I don't like about 401ks and IRAs, and also some to some level Roths. Roths don't have all the rules here, but still, I think a Roth is better. You still are supposed to be holding that money there till you're 59 and a half or older. And by the way, if you want to do it with a mutual fund, if you earn 7%, which is typical pretty much for the average mutual fund out there right now, you've got to, if you want to hit 100,000 a year of cash flow from that mutual fund in 10 years, what has to happen, guys, is that you're also chasing inflation. So you got to have a little bit more. It means you probably need to have roughly about $4 million or so. Actually, let me do the math here really quick. If you want to do 100,000 a year today in a mutual fund, you're only supposed to pull out 3% if you're trying to retire. If you're trying to retire early, like in your 30s or 40s, I got a friend that said, I can do it because the 4% rule says I can now pull out enough. I'm financially free. I said, well, you're 28 years old. Even though that's impressive that you got over $1 million, the problem is because if you actually do the numbers, you run it out. That 4% rule was actually made back in 1976, and it wasn't a rule. It was just a study they did. But even then, it's been debunked for the many, many years since then. It's more like a 3% rule for those in their 60s. But if you're trying to do it early, it's a 2% rule. He's like, wait, you mean you're saying I got to double the amount of money I have in my mutual funds? I'm like, yeah, you do. Because 3%, you can't guarantee you're going to always have 3%, especially with markets up and downs, inflation, everything else. You will likely run out of money before you're dead if you try to pull out 4% a year. He's like, I don't buy it. I'm like, you don't have to buy it, but just so you know, I was teaching about money and even teaching you about these kind of rules you're talking about when you were in first grade. Just saying, I love when there's like all these influencer stuff to teach you about money, and these guys were literally, like watching Teletubbies when I was being a financial advisor, learning how to do it wrong anyways, and they're doing it the different way and doing it right. But you got to love them still. But anyways, if you want 100,000 a year in 10 years and you're starting from zero, you got to save about $20,000 a month in a mutual fund to get to that point to pull off that 3%. More so if you want to live on 2% because you're younger. If you're trying to do it in an investment that's at 10%, like some more investments we have, people doing, usually it's at least 10 to 12%, you're saving about 5,000 a month. Not an easy task. That's almost 60,000 a year, but it's easier than 20,000 a month, isn't it? It's easier than trying to save $250,000 a year almost. Then if you get 12%, then you're saving about $3,700 a month. That's if you're starting from zero. If you guys have cash, this is why we have clients doing this within about 5 or 10 years sometimes, because they've already got some cash saved up and they trying to get to those goals. So now where's the returns happen? You have the stock market the last 6 years. I bought a rental property in May of 2018. And so I tracked the market. I said, what has it done? 12%. Okay. What about my property? What has it done in those last 6+ years? Here's the thing. If I put that $32,000 down payment, put it in the S&P 500 instead, which is better than most mutual funds, but I put in the S&P 500, I would have about $65,000 today. I would more than double my money. That's pretty dang good. That's better than the market usually does. But guys, that same property with not even including tax benefits that I have, right? That I get this income coming in that really I'm not paying taxes on. But still, the fact that one, renters are paying down my mortgage for me. Two, when there's appreciation, I get a multiplier effect because I used a mortgage because, my 32,000, if it's a $134,000 property I bought, which is what it was, if it appreciates 10%, it grows by 13,400. Well, 13,400 on 32,000 is a good chunk of change. It's not 10%. It's 5 times that down payment. It's about a 50% return on that 27,000 plus the 5,000 closing costs. So anyways, long story short, with appreciation and everything else, it's done about 415% versus the 100% in the market. I've done better. And my cash flow, guys, is over $8,000 a year right now. What cash flow would I got in the stock market? Zero. My daily life is never affected when I'm in the stock market. And how do I know this? Because I've had stock investors, including ones that sell you programs, reach out to me privately saying, hey, can you teach me how to create passive income? Because I can't do it even trading options or stocks. If that's not a sign, I don't know what is. Okay. Here's different passive investments that your financial advisor will never, ever want you to know about because they don't get paid if they tell you to put your money here. In fact, they lose money because they don't make any money off of you doing this stuff. One are turnkey rentals. That's like the rental I bought there 6 years ago. I have a property manager. I don't deal with that. I'm hands off. I bought the property, but I don't have to manage it. I just manage the property manager. If you have a good one, that is, then it works great. If you have a bad one, not so much. Lending or notes, I can be the bank. I can lend my money to people at different terms. Sometimes they'll pay me 10, 11, 12%. I actually had one last year that they paid me 15% a year on that note, and they paid me back in 3 months. There's funds. There's different types of funds you can put your money in, not mutual funds, but funds where maybe they invest in different things. Maybe it's a debt fund, but they're in multiple properties, not just one property like you could with a note, right? You could be invested in a lot of properties and have some diversification there. It could be equity, it could be debt. By the way, debtors get paid back first when it comes to the whole pecking order of who gets paid. Apartments, you can invest in apartments. There's self-storage units, you can invest in that. You don't have to buy the whole thing. You can partner with other people called syndications. You pool your money with other investors to go buy those things. Same thing with like oil and gas and mineral rights and things like that. I've even getting paid off of that right now. Partnerships, I actually have a partnership that's paying me pretty well. Right now, I have one partnership that we've put in almost $500,000 that's paying me over $11,000 a month. And what are we doing? We're reinvesting that to keep going and going because I want to build that to about 15 to 20,000 a month. This is just in about 3 years or so. Results may vary. Nothing's guaranteed. I want to make sure you guys have all those disclaimers, right? But think about it. $500,000. If I were a financial advisor and if I had $500,000 today, actually, when I first invested this, it was about $300,000. $300,000. If I had that money, as a financial advisor, I would tell you could pull off 3% or $9,000 a year. 9,000 a year, and then you have to pay taxes on it, unless it was a Roth IRA, right? But this 300,000, I took that cash flow, reinvested for the last 3 years. Now, I might have built up that 300,000 in a mutual fund in the last 3 years. I could have easily. I mean, it did decent in the market. Let's just say that we got up to $500,000 in 3 years. That would probably be more than it is, but let's just say it was. But say it was $500,000. I'm still living on 15,000 a year. Notice that this same money is making me 11,000 a month. Not a year, a month. And that compounding interest is growing like crazy. Okay. Now, how are some of our clients doing it as well? This particular client, this guy is out of California. What I love about his situation, remember I mentioned about having rental properties? He had one rental property. And he had it. It was like their pride and joy. Now, this guy was very much the saver mentality. He was always taught this: just keep saving money, avoid debt, which is great. This guy's a chiropractor doing a great job doing that. Now, when I saw his property, I said, well, you got 700,000 of equity in here. How much is it cash flowing you? $200 a month. Okay, that's 2,400 a year. Do you realize you're making a 0.3% return on that equity that you have in that property? That's 0.3%. That's like worse than a CD. He's like, yeah, but if I pay it off in 6 years, well, then it'll increase my cash flow. Okay, well, if you pay off the mortgage, then what will it be? It'll be 2,400 a month. Okay, 2,400 a month. Well, still that's less than 30,000 a year on that 700,000. That still means you're making like just over 4% a year. What if we sold this property, took the equity out and bought properties like out east? Because this is California. California is not great. Anything in the western half of the United States, horrible with rentals. Like, what if you go buy something out east? And for 2 years, he debated this between him and his wife and everything else. Couldn't do it. Finally, he caught the vision and did it. Sold it off, bought like 6 properties out in Louisiana. He's then taken all that cash flow, reinvested it. It's now 5 of those 6 years. Remember, he was supposed to pay off his debt, his mortgage next year in 2025 is when he would have paid off the mortgage and had 2,400 a month finally. Well, guess what? He's now over 100,000 a year with that same money he went to buy properties. Now he gets it. Yeah, it was hard for him to do it. If he had started 2 years earlier, he would have been way ahead of that. I told him even in 5 years, he probably would have hit the 100,000. Well, now it's been about 4 years, 3 to 4 years since he started doing it, and he's about 100,000 now. You could have done it so much faster had you just done it sooner. This guy right here, he actually found our podcast, the Money Ripples podcast, because he heard me on another podcast. He was told by his financial advisor, they said, well, listen, with your $1 million, you could pull off 30,000 a year. His financial advisor said the same thing, 3%, 30,000 a year. And he said, listen, I don't want to be a broke millionaire. There's got to be a better way to do this. And so he started searching around. That's why he was listening to different podcasts about real estate investing and whatnot, found us, reached out to us, started working with us. His now $1 million isn't making 30,000 a year. It's making over $100,000 a year with the investments that he has. This woman right here. Now you don't have to have $1 million to do it or 700,000. She had about 650,000. I know that's a lot less than 700,000. I know, I get it. But 650,000, her goal was to get to, really 72,000 a year or $6,000 a month. She hit it. She actually did within a couple of years of doing that. And what did she invest in? A variety of things, everything from oil to debt funds, real estate funds, you name it. Um, this Michigan doctor was interesting because he actually we actually didn't even do anything with investing. I just showed him. I said, "Listen, you're losing cash flow." He was a chiropractor. He was focusing really hard on that, but his practice was getting less and less profitable, and he was running out of steam. He was 62 years old. He's like, I just want to get out of this. And so I looked at the whole cash flow situation. I said, listen, if we actually can refinance your mortgage, you'll have to pay down your mortgage a little bit to get to that point because there wasn't as much equity in it. So if we pay down your mortgage, we can refinance it, pay off a few other loans with about $100,000 of your IRA. You had 500,000 in the IRA. And I was like, you can cash it out. Yeah, you'll pay taxes, but you'll free up $4,200 a month, guaranteed, if you do it this way. He's like, yeah, but Chris, how am I going to retire? I said, well, 100,000 IRA is producing 4,200 a month. That's 50,000 a year. That's a 50% rate of return on your money. But how am I going to retire? Finally, it was his wife that said, honey, this makes sense. Let's do it. So they did. They freed up 4,200 a month. We also saved him about 10,000 a year in taxes. And guess what? He started to relax. He started to have more fun in his practice. As a result, he started making an extra $2,000 or $3,000 more a month, not working any harder. It was just because he was happier and more people said yes to him and became patients. And so he actually ended up that 100,000. It wasn't just about improving the cash flow; it improved his lifestyle to the point and his happiness to the point where he made more money too. And that was like 90,000. I mean, if you had $100,000 to make you 90,000 a year, that's a pretty good deal, isn't it? Right? That's what we had to show him. But it was hard for him to do that way, and he still had the 400,000. He could still invest. This couple right here had a lot of money to invest. Haven't even invested all their money yet. But still, we were able to, even before we started to invest, we said, look, if we, actually refinance your mortgage and do a few of these things, we can actually free up $3,800 a month in loan payments. They were the ones I had mentioned about saving 30,000 plus a year in taxes because they have a business. And then we also sold a rental that wasn't cash flowing to then move that into a rental that was cash flowing at 2,000 a month. So already before we even really invested any actual money, right? I mean, that's already, let's see, what is that? Like about 40, almost 45,000 plus 30, 75,000. Oh, almost $100,000 a year just by moving money around and doing it more efficiently. And then they still have the 5 million to do whatever they want with it. And by the way, they still have some of those stocks to this day. They haven't sold off all their stocks, but they sold off some to then invest and make more money. So they're in the six figures now of savings and passive income. That's how this wealth wheel works. Does this make sense, guys? This is kind of making a little bit more sense for you. Type Y if you guys are following with me at this point. And I know it'll take you guys a few minutes. So let me break this down step by step. How do you do this, right? One, of course, as we're starting to free up cash flow and do stuff, one is you can open that Max ROI Infinite Banking policy. Start there. Start funding your policy with your emergency savings. Then three, when you start to build up past the emergency savings point, you got extra above and beyond that, then you start investing for passive income with that. And of course, if you got other monies, other stuff, we can invest for passive income right now. We don't have to wait, right? That's the good news. If you got significant amount of cash, I would say at least $150,000, $200,000 right now, you can even safely diversify into different types of investments and still do the policy too. Then four, use the cash flow to pay down the loan if you use the loan to invest with the life insurance policy. And then you just keep repeating that process until you get to the point that you're actually work optional. And like I said, you can actually do it at whatever age you want, right? Like I've done it twice before I was 40, but for you guys, you could do it whenever based on whatever your situation is. Give you other stories too. Like I had a couple where they said, our dream is to actually pull our kids out of school, homeschool them, take them out abroad, like Costa Rica or Mexico. And so I said, well, the best thing you have to use your asset wise is you have your house, it has equity in it. If you want to go be an expat, you want to go abroad, why don't you just sell off your house? You don't need it, right? It's like, well, we could turn it to a rental. And we ran the numbers. We're like, nah, selling it would be better, which is usually the case. Selling the properties are usually better than just trying to rent them, turn around and rent them, especially in the western half of the US. And so we sold the property. They used all that to buy more properties that now pay for their lifestyle. And yeah, she still has a side hustle business on the side as well that she creates income with, but she's part-time. But he was able to quit his job, quit his business and then go abroad with them. And now they're living in Cabo, living the dream, so to speak. I had other people too. I had one client. This was really cool. He only had $250,000 to start with. And when I say only, I mean, it wasn't like he had millions of dollars like some of our clients have had, right? He had $250,000. And I've had some people come to me like, hey, having 150,000, 200,000, $250,000, is that enough? Yeah. because he took that quarter million. This is in 2019. This is 5 years ago. That quarter million, it would have doubled roughly in the stock market. But instead, he went and bought different types of real estate. To this day, guys, his cash flow on this is over 3,500 a month, now approaching almost 4,000 a month. So he's got that cash flow coming in, but guess what? He's also got equity in these properties. That quarter million has now grown into equity of over $660,000. Yeah, it would have been a half million stock market, but it would have paid him nothing. But now he has 660,000 of equity, actually pushed him into millionaire status when before he wasn't anywhere close. So now he's technically a millionaire, and he's really making about $40,000 a year with that cash, or over 40,000 a year, I guess it is, right? Because it's over 3,500 a month. So he's closer to about 45,000 a year he's making in passive income, and it made him a millionaire. And he's like, this is even with, any possible bumps or bruises along the way, because obviously real estate's not perfect. Yes, you can lose money in real estate just like you could in the stock market. It's possible. But we really try to make it as minimal as possible so that you get more guaranteed freedom. That's how they do it. And by the way, he's not even 50 yet. So he's just about to turn 50. So this person actually, he's about 30, or he actually wants to do this before he gets in his early 30s. This was his plan. He was doing some passive income, buying some rentals and whatnot. He was just trying to buy one a year. You could kind of see the, year by year breakdown. Well, I looked at it. I said, well, you're still short. You're at 4,400. You want to get the 5,000 a month in 2029. He's like, yeah, but Chris, look up above. Part of that 950 a month is coming from my life insurance. He's like, because I'm actually building that up and I'm going to take the income streams off of it. I ran the numbers because I thought maybe he was overestimating. He was right to the dollar. He was exactly right. He could pull off 950 a month for decades off his life insurance. Because, by the way, did you know with the life insurance, you can actually don't have to fund it for your whole life, even though it's called a whole life insurance. You don't have to fund it your whole life. So if you get to that point, you say, cool, now I want to take a break. Good. You just take a break. It pays off any loans you might have. It just rides and keeps growing forever. And you can take tax-free income off of it down the road. So the cool thing is it's like a Roth IRA, but you don't have all the limitations with the Roth IRA. You can only put in 6,000 a year. You can put in up to 25% of your stated gross annual income each year into those kind of plans. So he was using both passive income with it, all working together to get him there by the time he's in his 30s. How many of us wish we could go back in time and do that very same strategy, right? I know I wish I could have done it right the first time. So here's what needs to change, guys. Kind of wrapping this up is, one, you got to know your numbers. You got to know where you are. How can you find more money? How can you free up that money, get lean, get liquid, and then get it out? You got to have an acceleration mindset, not an accumulation mindset. You cannot think about compounding interest anymore when you don't know if you're going to be there, right? And be willing to give you and your family what life you deserve, because cash flow is what really creates freedom. Now, if you want to see how to create that Max ROI Infinite Banking policy, here's a QR code you can scan. You can use your phones. If you're already on your phone, maybe you screenshot it. Honestly, I don't know how to do it because I'm not a tech genius, but definitely you could do that. Of course, and there's also a link to schedule in the notes on here too. You can see that on the side, the comments that we put on there. So there's also a link to schedule a call in case you can't scan the QR code. But definitely invite you to kind of take a look at that, see if it's for you. I'll tell you this: if you can't save at least 5 or 10,000 a year, I wouldn't book a call. If you can't at least save something, even if you have no emergency fund and no money to save, I wouldn't do it. But you might reach out to us to say, well, what are some first steps I can do to work towards that? Then you might want to reach out. Maybe just get a cheap term policy or something in the meantime while you're trying to improve your cash flow, right? So there are some options there. But you don't have at least 5 or 10,000 a year. That Max ROI Infinite Banking strategy is not going to work as much, right? But if you do, great. There's always ways. Now I want to talk about today. This was back in July. I actually went to visit my dad for his 80th birthday. Totally surprised him. Brought 4 of my kids. I actually have 8 total between my wife's kids and my kids, but brought 4 of my kids to go see him. And to this day, guys, he never thought he'd live to 80. What he's doing, he is literally stretching out his dollars to make ends meet, stretching everything. Even sometimes, just trying to do whatever he can, right? He's even like looking at his house as a reverse mortgage and things like that, because he never, ever thought, none of us thought he'd be alive past the age of 70, let alone 80. But here he is today, right? By some miracle, he's here. And so he's trying to stretch out every dollar. And although he doesn't necessarily have this legacy to pass on of wealth in the sense of money, here's the thing that he did do, is that he still passed on those values of working hard. Your word is your bond, right? And my mom teaching me how to follow my dreams, everything else, that I can still instill into my kids. And that's the kind of legacy that I love leaving, right? Because that's something that money can't buy, is it? So even though he can't give me the money wealth wise, he still pass on these values that I want to pass on to my kids, to pass on to their kids and their kids and their kids and keep it going. But even nicer is that now I can actually change it. I can be the person that's that catalyst in the family to then also pass on money and wealth too. And not just pass it on to create trust fund babies and spoiled brats. No, I want to pass it on and teach them how to be good stewards, wise stewards of that money so that they can do it better than I did during my lifetime. That's the kind of legacy I want to leave behind. Question you have to ask yourself is, what is the legacy you want to leave behind? What is it you want? I mean, even just the example, if you could even buy more years of your freedom now, what if you could actually be work optional? You might still keep working because you might love what you do. What if you could be work optional where you now have more free time to spend with your kids while they still have time to spend with you before they're off on their own, they're gone? What could you do then, right? How can you do that? I love this GPS because I literally took this while I was driving to my bank. Um, Notice that, of course, it should be 1 minute, taking the eco-friendly way. But notice if I took the other direction. If I went the other way, it's 24,855 days and 3 hours slower. It was so unbelievable. I had to get a screenshot for you guys, even if it's just for humor's sake. But isn't that kind of true? What we just talked about in the beginning, right? Is that so many people spend so much of their time trying to get financially free, and they're trying to do it with just the traditional mutual funds, following the same advice that financial advisors have been giving for 4 decades, but it still hasn't worked. Just like it didn't work for me when I was a financial advisor. Even when I inherited clients from other financial advisors, they weren't financially free either. And neither are the financial advisors. So if it didn't work for them, who would it work for? Why would we keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result? If the opposite, if everything you're doing has been wrong, then the opposite must be right. Is the late and great, well, not late, he's still alive, as Jerry Seinfeld said, right? It's so true there too. You can pick a different life, but it requires you to have a different way of thinking and a different way of doing. And just remember this, guys, is that we're talking about 55. It's not just 55, it's doing it younger if you can, because the most dangerous risk of all is spending your life not doing what you want on the bet that you can do it. You can buy yourself that freedom to do it later. What if there isn't a later? What if we don't live to 55? What if we don't make it then? I'll tell you, I had one client that he was a dentist that we actually got him to the point where he was financially free right towards the end. He still had his practice, but he got financially free. He started to buy some of his time back. He didn't make it to the age of 40, guys. He actually passed away this last year. I am so grateful he had a little bit of that extra time to spend with his family before he was gone. I'm sure his family was grateful they're able to have that too. Guys, there are no guarantees in life. There's nothing guaranteed at all. The only guarantee I can give you is that there are no guarantees, right? But I can guarantee you this, is that you have an option. You have a choice. You now know enough to make a decision. The question is, what will you do with that information? Will you take the blue pill and just go on with your life, living that life, that hoping that you'll be the 1% that actually makes it? Or will you take something different that's been proven for tens of millions of us to work as well? That's the choice you get. All right, I'm going to open up for questions at this point. I know I went a little bit longer, but obviously, if it was this valuable, type that in the chat. Any comments? If you don't have a question, just type in what was the biggest thing you got from this last hour here that we've been chatting together. Love to hear that. Any questions? If you want me to clarify on something, ask that question right now. So those of you live, you get the benefit. Those of you that watch the recording later, we'll answer it later, in the comments or whatever. But definitely for those of you guys that invested your time here, I want to make sure I give you priority access. So those of you guys that have questions, great. If you don't have a question, just leave a comment to say, here's the thing that stuck with me. Here's the thing that I think I need to do to take action right now. Or here's something that just blew my mind. Definitely share that in the comments here. So, by the way, while you're doing that, because I know it takes about a minute for your question to show up for me, just to remind you, here is the link to schedule that call. If you want to try to figure out how to do that Max ROI Infinite Banking plan, that's the stuff that we actually design and set up. And literally, by the way, we have saved. I actually have one client who's a dentist that we actually saved them $2.25 million over the next 20 years versus the other quote unquote infinite banking plan that they're already doing. I almost didn't do anything with it because I thought, oh, they've already been in it for 6 years. It's fine. But man, I'll tell you, when I ran the numbers, apples to apples, put in the same amount of money, they're putting in about $150,000 a year between these two plans, or actually multiple plans they had. Found out that we could actually make them $2.25 million more, and they will still even have more death benefit too. Mind blowing. It was shocking. So I can't promise you guys that it will make you 2.25 million more in 20 years. But definitely it's pretty cool. All right, so here's a question right here. It says, when paying back a loan in the Max ROI account, are taxes paid only on the gains to the account as opposed to the borrowed principal? Uh, the truth is that nothing, that account is tax free. So everything that happens inside the life insurance policy is tax free. So if you're paying back the loan, there are no taxes paid on any gains, nothing like that. If you do withdraw more than what you've paid in and contributed into that plan, the gains that way, if you withdraw the money, yes, you can be taxed. But I mean, anything you've paid into it doesn't get taxed that way when you withdraw. But if you borrow, there are no taxes. There are never taxes on when you borrow money. So that's the good news. So even if you pay it back and they're paying you interest, you actually don't pay any interest. Now, here's one thing to clarify that you may or may not have asked, Terry, is that some people say, well, what about the investments I put my money into? Like, is this like a Roth IRA where I can invest in something and it stays tax free? Nope. This works just like a savings account, but like a tax free savings account. When you're using that money and borrowing from the insurance company, and when you use it, whatever tax benefits or non-tax benefits you get in that investment, you get normal tax treatment. So if I were to take this money, borrow it, and put it into my business for business expenses, yes, I actually get to write off. Well, one, I don't get taxed on it, right? But two, I actually get to write off the interest I'm paying too, because it's used for a business expense. But anything I put in expense wise, I still get the tax break like normal. If I go and buy a rental property, I still get all the benefits of depreciation, everything from the rentals, because it's just like using cash. So it's treated just like you're using cash when you use that money. But of course, it's like borrowing. If you borrow from it, it could be like a very low interest credit card that you're using. So great question, Terry. I really appreciate that one. Uh, Daisy says, like, I have a question. Right now, I have some cash value in my policy, but I don't know how to start. You know what? And you just got the illustration for your policy. Awesome. That's what I was just going to say, Daisy. And this goes for anybody. If you already currently have an insurance plan and you're not really sure, well, one, you're not even sure if you have a good one, or two, or how to use it. What you can do is you can ask for what's called an in-force illustration. That's IN force, FORCE illustration. You ask that from the insurance company. You don't ask the agent. You just go right to the insurance company directly. They'll send that to you by email usually. And it could take anywhere from a day to a couple of weeks, depending on how slow that company is. But that in-force illustration is all we need to be able to analyze it, see how you can use it, what it's like, because some people think, oh, I've got this plan. And then they find out they've got like an actual universal life policy instead, which is not the same kind of plan. It's actually a much riskier plan too. So you got to be careful of that. But that's a great one there. So yeah, so the best thing to do there, Daisy, is like when you set up that meeting, just send that illustration on to do that, to cover in your meeting. So and then we can help explain to you what you've got. If it's good, we'll tell you. We'll be honest with you. We won't mess with anything that we think should be messed with. Just like I almost didn't do for that dental couple that I was working with, that I thought it was going to be good, but luckily they said, Chris, can you double check? And then when we did, and then we found out what they had actually was really sucky in comparison to what they could do. And it wasn't even the worst. It was just a good policy. It just wasn't the best, right? So definitely, Daisy, we would love to serve you that way. So, all right, guys. Well, I appreciate your time. I know I hope this is time well invested for you. I hope this gave you some epiphany, at least gave you some insight of what perspective you need to have, how to use this Max ROI Infinite Banking, and then, of course, how to use that with passive investing to get you to be able to be financially free before you're 55. Guys, I've learned this, is that there's never time to waste. We have one client right now, actually, that he's actually about 50 years old, found out he has this rare disease that could kill him at any moment. And so the thing that actually inspired him to do it, to actually work with us on the passive income side, not even just the insurance side, the passive investing side, was, wait, if this could happen to me at any day, how would I use my money differently? Would I just wait for that 60 or 65 age, or would I do it sooner? He decided to act sooner as a result. And man, it was so awesome to see him. And the cool thing is, he even brought his son to one of our events, his 18-year-old son, to teach him how to do it too. So anyways, we can serve you guys. I know that it takes a lot of faith, and how to see it. Chris, I will just tell you that question you have right there, I actually did a podcast that's going to get released in about a week or two for that very question. So Chris, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our Money Ripples podcast channel to do that. Because it does take a lot of faith, and it does take a little bit of time to get in. You don't have to jump all the way in, but you do just a little bit at a time. And that's my recommendation for all of you, is that you don't have to just go full on in. It does take faith to build and see proof of concept. And that's just fine. That's how most of our clients do it anyways. So anyways, if any way we can serve you, reach out to us, moneyripples.com, or use that link as well for the Max ROI Infinite Banking. Guys, make it a wonderful and prosperous week. And or whatever. Sorry, I just went into podcast mode. Guys, make it a great day. And let me know how we can serve you. Thanks.